Our last speaker in this very large panel that we have here is Sally Ndung'u, and she comes from Kenya. She's also IPPNW, and she is also, hopefully, I don't want to, take away from the actual election, but she is hopefully going to be our Vice President for Africa and join the boards of IPPNW. Thank you, Sally.
Thank you very much. African states are delighted to finally have a treaty that could lead to the total elimination of nuclear weapons. Although Africa was declared a non-nuclear weapon-free zone in 2009, when the Pelindaba Treaty became official, in case of a possible nuclear detonation, we are unlikely to remain completely unaffected. And therefore, burdened by our vulnerability to a possible nuclear detonation, African states have worked tirelessly towards nuclear disarmament, led by South Africa, which remains the only state that once had nuclear weapons and willingly gave them up. And in a region that often has a false sense of security, where nuclear war is concerned because of the lack of nuclear weapons in the region, the Bern Treaty can be a great educational tool, both to the public and to the governments at large. Key educational strategies by international peace organizations and civil societies would include organizing a series of educational forums in which we would educate parliamentarians, members of the public, and members of the press on the humanitarian consequences of nuclear weapons as brought out clearly in the preamble of the treaty, the importance of this in the African region, and hence the importance of being party to the treaty. In educating the public on this, we need to focus on a number of countries, not forgetting the countries that actually voted for the treaty during the last UN General Assembly. We need to focus on the countries that did not vote for the treaty. Countries that the 14 African states that have not yet signed the Pelindaba Treaty, and we shouldn't also forget the uranium giants in Africa, including Niger and Namibia. A key parliamentary and political strategy by civil societies and international organizations such as IPPNW would be organizing rampant campaigns in the regions to steer public support and arouse government interest in the topic. And in this way, our government will make the issue of nuclear disarmament a core part of their manifesto and also actively get involved with the international community in the struggle towards nuclear disarmament. Therefore, we shouldn't also underestimate the importance of lobbying actively for parliamentary support and signing and ratification of the treaty by individual countries. So concrete regional strategies within the next 2 years would include getting all the 54 African states to sign the treaty. This would happen, as stated before, only through continuous education, active campaigns, advocacy, and lobbying, focusing especially on countries in Africa that have potential nuclear weapon capability, such as Libya, and countries that have not yet ratified the Pelindaba Treaty. African states also need to come together, perhaps through the African Union, to give focused and coordinated regional statement on the issue of nuclear disarmament. And in the statement, states their support for the nuclear ban treaty and the sense of insecurity that we feel by the presence of nuclear weapons in the nuclear weapon states. And through this focused regional statement, we'll be able to put pressure on the nuclear weapon states and the nuclear dependent states to join the treaty and adhere to its prohibitions and obligations. Another key strategy would, perhaps through the Pelindaba Treaty, would be to amend it to favor the treaty for the prohibition of nuclear weapons more than it favors the non-proliferation treaty. So these are a few key strategies that we can focus on in Africa over the next 2 years that could possibly lead to the successful implementation of the nuclear ban treaty. And as Former South African president once stated, "A multipolar world is unlikely to endure for long the idea of some states possessing weapons of mass destruction that all other states have agreed to forego." Thank you very much.
And I'm going to invite Sally Ndung'u. Sally is the Regional Vice President of the Africa region for IPPNW. Over to you.
Thank you very much. Thank you for this opportunity to address you. Before I start, I'd like to thank Ambassador Thomas Hanoshi from Austria. We have been inspired by his efforts towards nuclear disarmament as the permanent representative of Austria at the United Nations. And we're also very grateful that Austria has offered to host the next meeting of states parties. Also, I'd like us to acknowledge the efforts of a man who served IPPNW for quite a number of years and might be retiring as the program director. He's worked tirelessly towards nuclear disarmament as well, and I'd like us to give him a round of applause, none other than John Loretz. Thank you very much. Indeed, it has been a great 3 days for all of us who have participated in this conference, held through Peace 2017. Every good thing comes to an end, but I believe that this is not the end, but the beginning, because we live here with new ideas, renewed strength and courage, and a stronger affirmation in creating a culture of peace and disarmament. Through the well-experienced speaker, many thanks to each one of them, and our daily interactions with each other, I am positive that we have gained inspiration to continue working towards peaceful and hence healthy societies. The idea of health through peace has been reaffirmed in each one of our minds in our different capacities, either as health workers, peace workers, or members of various civil societies. This has been a different conference. In this particular conference, we have shared the joy of the recent adoption of the Treaty for the Prohibition of Nuclear Weapons, which was adopted by the United Nations on 7th of July 2017. Despite the hope and optimism it brings, we realize that the journey is not over. The journey has just begun. Our collective effort is needed to get as many states as possible to sign and ratify the treaty in the shortest time possible. It is our hope that during our next Congress meeting, we shall unite again to celebrate that indeed the treaty will have been made law and we shall be living in a world free of nuclear weapons. At this very crucial time in history, we are grateful to the North Korean affiliate which has found time to join us in this Congress this year. We recognize the amount of courage that this group has, fighting against nuclear weapons at a time when their country is undergoing a nuclear weapons crisis. All of us have made this possible, and as we disperse, let us go and make IPPNW great. The world needs me and the world needs you. Thank you very much.
My name is Sally Ndung'u. I am from Kenya. I am a member of IPPNW Kenya, and also I have worked as the Regional Vice President for Africa for the last 2 years. Health through peace basically is an aspect of medical workers and their role in conflict resolution and peace. As doctors and healthcare providers, we are the ones who deal directly with the humanitarian effects of any kind of violence, in terms of any disability, in terms of any long-term illness due to either nuclear weapon violence or other forms of violence, armed conflicts, etc. They all come to us, and therefore we have a voice in terms of exposing the humanitarian consequences of any form of violence. It is important for us to prevent violence in the first place, because through violence we get a lot of people who either lose their lives or become disabled or deal with problems that as doctors we cannot be able to treat completely. And therefore, as doctors, it is important for us to address all forms of violence and prevent it, because if we don't prevent it, we'll have patients come to us with the consequences of violence, and we won't be able to reach out to them and help them. Even though there seems to be a false sense of security in certain parts of the world, and also in even the nuclear weapon states, I think the mere presence of nuclear weapons in this time and era is one of the greatest concerns that we have. In the southern countries, armed violence, civil war, such things are very important, and we should tackle such things. Okay, the Prohibition Treaty was passed in the United Nations General Assembly on 7th of July 2017, where 122 states out of 124 states voted in favor of it. Only one state voted no, and one state abstained. So basically, it's a treaty for the prohibition of nuclear weapons. It prohibits the possession, the testing, the presence of nuclear weapons, and it has other aspects that are not part of the Non-Proliferation Treaty. For example, it talks about stockpile destruction, it talks about victim assistance. So yeah, with this treaty, we'll be able to see to it that we actually have a world free of nuclear weapons. With this treaty, we shall be able to, it is a good tool that we can use to ensure that finally we get nuclear weapons out of the way. So in Africa and other non-nuclear weapon states, we know that we are vulnerable to a possible nuclear detonation. In case of a war anywhere, because of the fact that we do not have nuclear weapons, we won't even be able to defend ourselves. So we are more vulnerable than any other state, the nuclear-dependent states or the nuclear-armed states. Therefore, in the last few years, non-nuclear dependent states have even tried to get an international legally binding treaty for negative security assurance, where the nuclear weapon states actually write it down that they won't attack non-nuclear weapon states. But even with this, we won't be protected 100% from the effects of a nuclear war in any part of the world, and therefore it is perhaps good that this negative security assurance treaty actually has never come to be. So therefore now we can focus on the nuclear ban treaty, because this is the only way in which we can ensure our security, the security of our region, and the security of our future as Africa.